In just 36 seconds, the second most powerful man in the United States revealed to the world that he is sitting on something so classified, so explosive, that disclosing it could potentially land him in prison. This revelation came yesterday in North Carolina, when a reporter from the Associated Press asked Vice President JD Vance a straightforward question. What did you tell President Trump before he initiated a war in the Middle East? Vance, who has never struggled for words in his life, suddenly fell silent in a very specific way. "I hate to disappoint you," he said, "but I'm not going to show up here in front of God and everybody else and tell you exactly what I said in that classified room, partially because I don't want to go to prison." Now, here's where mainstream coverage went awry. They laughed at it, clipped it, and turned it into a punchline. But if you pause and consider what he actually said, the humor dissipates quickly. That line was not a joke. It was a confession, not of a crime, but of something arguably more destabilizing. It was an admission from a vice president who was present when the most significant military decision of 2026 was made, and who is now on camera indicating that he cannot disclose what he said, that his words are significant enough to potentially land him in federal prison if revealed. This suggests that there are people around him who want you to know that what he privately believed diverges from what he publicly performed. This gap, the space between what Vance stated publicly yesterday and what is now leaking out of the White House through multiple senior officials, is the real story. It's a narrative about a war, a man's conscience, a political calculation, and a presidency that may be on the brink of fracturing over the consequences of a decision that Vance apparently never fully endorsed. To understand the weight of this moment, we must go back to February 28, 2026. That day marked a pivotal shift. In the early hours of the morning, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated campaign of airstrikes targeting Iranian leadership compounds, nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile production facilities, naval assets, and command centers. What unfolded in the first 12 hours was described by analysts as the most concentrated assault on a nation's military architecture since the Gulf War. The United States alone expended an estimated 1,250 offensive and defensive munitions. Defense officials later informed Congress that the cost of those 2 days of munitions alone was roughly $5.6 billion. One of the strikes targeted the Ba'athari compound, which housed the Supreme Leader's office and residence in Tehran. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who had ruled Iran for 36 years, was killed in that opening wave. With him perished the last predictable figure at the top of the Iranian state. Iran retaliated immediately and broadly, launching ballistic missiles and drones at U.S. embassies, Gulf state military installations, oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, and commercial infrastructure extending from Dubai to Doha to Bahrain. The U.S. embassy in Kuwait was struck and evacuated, and an Iranian missile hit a girls' school near Bandar Abbas, tragically killing over 170 students. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of the world's oil transits, came to a standstill. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted more than 1,000 points in a single session. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that the first 100 hours of the operation cost approximately $3.7 billion, most of it unbudgeted. Throughout this turmoil, during the dignified transfer of fallen U.S. service members and frantic appearances on Fox News defending a war he had previously claimed he did not want, JD Vance worked diligently to maintain a balance between loyalty and survival. Yesterday, a reporter asked him to step off that line and reveal the truth. Instead of stepping forward, he chose to risk the appearance of hiding something rather than risk stating it out loud. So what exactly is he hiding? Let's examine the evidence. Receipt 1, a Politico report published the same morning Vance gave that press conference. Politico spoke to 2 senior officials within the Trump administration. One of them sent a text message stating, "Vance is skeptical, is worried about success, and just opposes the war on Iran." Not opposed in the past tense, but opposes in the present tense. As the strikes continue, casualties mount, and the Strait of Hormuz remains contested while gas prices soar, the man who was supposed to sell this war to the American public does not believe in it. The White House pushed back immediately, calling him a tremendous asset. However, Trump himself, speaking at Mar-a-Lago, did something more revealing. He did not deny the division. He acknowledged it, stating that Vance was philosophically a little bit different than me, adding that Vance was maybe less enthusiastic about going. But then he included a crucial qualifier. Vance was still quite enthusiastic. That sentence carries a lot of weight. It's the kind of statement you make when you're trying to cover up a crack that you know is visible. Receipt 2, a New York Times report from March 3rd, which delved into the actual deliberations in the Situation Room before the strikes. What emerged was a picture of a vice president attempting to occupy two positions simultaneously. According to the Times, Vance personally leaned against military attacks on Iran, but also argued that a limited strike would be a mistake. His position, as described by sources familiar with his thinking, was that if the U.S. was going to strike Iran at all, it should do so decisively and quickly. That may sound hawkish at first, but when viewed from another angle, it reveals a sophisticated way of opposing an open-ended, escalating conflict. It reflects the position of someone who wants to exit the war before it starts, knowing that the only quick exit is a decisive outcome rather than a prolonged engagement. It's a Machiavellian stance, and it has left Vance with no clean narrative to share, especially since the U.S. did indeed go big, and the war has not ended. Khamenei is dead, but his son Mojtaba was installed as the new supreme leader within days. Iran's missile forces have been degraded, but they have not ceased operations. Now, reports indicate the Pentagon is moving additional Marines and warships to the region, suggesting this is far from the short, sharp operation Vance promised the American people it would be. Receipt 3, the pattern. This is not the first time Vance has found himself caught between his instincts and his role. In March 2025, a group chat involving Vance, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and other senior officials was accidentally shared with a journalist at The Atlantic. In that chat, the morning before U.S. airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, Vance plainly stated, "I think we are making a mistake." He argued that only 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez Canal, while 40% of European trade does. He questioned whether the American public would understand why the U.S. was effectively protecting European shipping lanes, and warned of a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. Then, in a line that will follow him for years, he wrote, "I am willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself." That sentence is crucial for understanding everything happening right now. Vance has built a political identity around anti-interventionism. He endorsed Donald Trump in 2024 specifically because Trump had not started any wars during his first term. He even wrote an op-ed titled "Trump's Best Foreign Policy: Not Starting Any Wars." 2 days before Operation Epic Fury launched, he told the Washington Post that he is a skeptic of foreign military interventions and that everyone prefers the diplomatic option. Then the bombs dropped, and he stood at the podium and proclaimed that the operation was right, necessary, and different from all previous wars. That tension is not trivial. It is the central fact of JD Vance's political existence right now. He is an Iraq war veteran who gained prominence by arguing that the foreign policy establishment of both parties has failed American workers by spending blood and treasure on overseas misadventures. He rose to prominence by rejecting that consensus, and now he finds himself as the #2 official in an administration that has just launched one of the most consequential military operations of the 21st century without a congressional vote against a country that has since retaliated across 9 nations. When that AP reporter asked him yesterday what he said in the Situation Room, she was essentially asking him to account for the distance between who he was and who he is now. His answer, with its half-joke about going to prison, was the most honest thing he has said in weeks, because it communicated that there is something in that room he cannot reconcile with the persona he has presented to the public, and he is not going to be the one to make that reconciliation visible. Now, let's discuss the 2028 dimension, because ignoring it would mean missing half the story. Donald Trump has publicly floated 2 names as potential successors, Vance and Marco Rubio. They are not allies, they are rivals in a race that has not officially started but is already underway. On the issue of Iran, they could not be more differently positioned. Rubio has been one of the most vocal hawks in the administration. He was front and center at every major press conference defending the strikes and is aligned with Trump's triumphalist framing of the war. If this operation succeeds, Rubio's credentials will be unmatched. However, if it does not succeed, if the conflict drags on, if casualties rise, if gas prices continue to climb, and if voters who currently oppose the war, which according to a Quinnipiac poll from March 9th is 53% of the electorate, turn that opposition into a political verdict in the 2026 midterms and beyond, then Vance needs to be on record as the man who had doubts, the man who asked hard questions in the Situation Room, the man who cared about the cost to ordinary Americans. In essence, the man who was right. The leaks to Politico did not happen by accident. Senior officials do not send text messages to national journalists characterizing the vice president's private views unless those characterizations serve someone's interest. Vance's camp wants you to know he opposed this war. They want a paper trail, not a legal paper trail, but a political one. This is what makes yesterday's press conference moment so layered. He cannot confirm the leaks. Doing so would mean confirming what was said in the Situation Room, which is classified. He cannot deny them without inviting contradictions from the officials sourcing the stories. So instead, he stands in front of cameras in North Carolina and says he would go to prison if he told you what he really said, which functions brilliantly and infuriatingly as confirmation without confirmation. The silence speaks volumes. The refusal to deny speaks louder than a denial would. And here lies the real danger, not for Vance personally, but for the country watching this unfold. What is being quietly established through leaks, careful positioning, and prison jokes is that the Vice President of the United States has private reservations about the biggest foreign policy decision of this administration. The second in command, the man who would assume the presidency in an emergency, is not fully aligned with the commander-in-chief on a live escalating war in the Middle East. The inner circle of the most powerful government in the world is quietly and carefully managing a fracture, and 13 American service members are dead. Hundreds more are injured. The Strait of Hormuz is still disrupted. Oil markets remain volatile. A new supreme leader has been installed in Tehran who has pledged to continue the conflict. And American factories have been warned by the Pentagon that they have only weeks of certain materials before supply chains buckle. The question Vance will not answer, the answer he claims would send him to prison, is not just about what he said in the room. It's about whether anyone in that room genuinely believed this would go the way it was sold. Did the intelligence support the promise of a short, decisive operation? Was the president given a full assessment of what Iranian retaliation would look like? Was the decision strategic, or, as critics across the political spectrum are beginning to argue, something else entirely? Vance is not a stupid man. He is, by all accounts, one of the sharper minds in American politics. He sat in that room, heard the options, asked questions, and raised concerns. Then, because the decision had been made and the bombs were falling, he appeared on Fox News and claimed everything was proceeding according to plan. Yesterday, for 36 seconds, the mask slipped just enough to reveal the shape of what lies beneath. He will not disclose what he said in that room. He will not confirm what his own officials are leaking to Politico. He will not stand next to Trump and echo the language of total victory that the president has used throughout this conflict. He will attend dignified transfers, give carefully hedged interviews, and perform loyalty without expressing certainty. And when a reporter asks him to account for the difference, he will look into the camera and say that the honest answer would land him in federal prison. Perhaps that is legal caution. Perhaps it is classified procedure being properly observed. Or maybe it is the sound of a politician who knows exactly how this chapter ends and is meticulously ensuring that his name does not appear in the final line. The war continues, the questions remain classified, and JD Vance, the anti-interventionist who has found himself within the most interventionist operation of the decade, is keeping his concerns to himself, for now. If this story is developing in the way we suspect, you'll want to be watching this channel when it breaks open. Hit subscribe and stay close, because the version of events that will be locked into history is still being written, and the man with the most to hide about it just told you so himself.